interacting with many people on different occasions and trying to understand to the best possible extent. So in that pursuit, let me also put across these ideas to you, which is well known to all of us. Let us review, reflect back on those ideas, and then try to see how best we have visualized all those aspects, and then how do we go further ahead in the changing. Okay, so it is in that perspective I am now trying to make my presentation here. I want more of your interactions, and it is through sharing of information and discussing those ideas. So we are learning together. So it is in that perspective I am trying to carry out this session in two parts. In the first part, I will be only talking about what is teaching, what are the ways, methods, or the approaches that are available to us for making teaching. Then I'll be moving on to learning. What is learning, how learning happens, and what are the theories related to learning that we are already aware of. And in the second part, I'll be focusing on what is exactly is the learning outcomes and how that outcomes are determined, how it is being shaped and focused on, and how those learning outcomes are taken as a directive for all our learning activities, including the assessment activities. Then from that, we move on to the assessment, the kinds of assessment, and the way we are trying to do the assessment, and how one can look at it in a multiple ways. So that is the way I am trying to address this two session on this day. Hope I think it is more convenient to you. Okay, let me start to you by asking this question, because all of us are in this profession. So it is a common question. So what is teaching? So anybody can unmute yourself and you can answer this. You can unmute and answer.
Teaching is a process, conversation between the students and the teachers.
Okay. It is a process, it is a conversation process. That is what you want to highlight. Yes, sir. Yes. Anyone?
Enhancing the skills and knowledge of the students.
Skills and knowledge of the students. Okay, fine.
Next. Imparting knowledge.
Imparting knowledge. Okay, fine.
Next. The interaction between both, sir.
Both. Okay. Both means what, sir?
It's a teacher and the student, sir.
Teacher and the student. Okay, fine. Okay, now with all your answers in mind.
Sir, educate and mentor the student.
Okay, fine, sir. So the next question comes to you. Is it the process of filling the mind with information? How many say yes or how many say no?
No,
yes, sir.
Huh? Is it the process of filling the information? Fine.
No, sir.
Okay.
No, sir.
We have a difference of opinion, no problem. We can have difference in our opinions on that. Okay. But it is not the process of filling the mind with information. So that is the one. Then, is this a one-way process?
No, sir.
No, sir. This is a two-way process.
It is a two-way.
No, sir. No, sir.
Yes. So it is it only a two-way process? Okay. It can be
Yes,
one.
sir. Two-way process.
Apart from two-way, it can be one to many. Okay. So even that can also be looked into. In that way, it is a multiple process that we can explore. In that way, teaching can also happen. So as you said, it is a two-way process. Is that two-way process without context or content? So your communication is based on what? Is it, do you require context or do you require content for it? Or without those two also we can go on talking about it?
We need
Both
content,
we
sir.
need, sir, contact.
Okay, content is essential, and based on the content, you may create or you may redesign the context. Okay, so without the content or the context, the communication will not happen. And through communication, interactions will take place, and through interactions only the learning process happens.
Sure.
Okay.
Change again. Participants?
So is my PPT visible to you?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. 1 minute. Share entire screen.
Now change the PPT.
Yes, sir.
Now
Yes.
visible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
fine. We are in the second slide. Okay. Now then, when you talk, so for answering that, if you want to break down that, what is curriculum and how do we transact the curriculum in a given time frame?
Curriculum act as just like a guide, sir, or it's a guideline.
Okay. Then, so curriculum, as the epistemological meanings talks about it, it is a course to be run. So that means it is a course which needs to be discussed, debated over a period of time. Run means it is a time period. And the course means it is the discourse of the knowledge that you want to do within the given time frame is what curriculum is. So each subject comes out with his own framework, with his own guidelines, and we need to work within those framework itself. So therefore, we try to do that. So that curriculum that we are trying to look at it, it is a very broader framework which gives a major guidelines or the pathways to look at it. And that we break down into meaningful forms in the form of syllabi. And further, the syllabi is converted into with the information loaded textbooks. Okay, the curriculum ultimately reaches the learner or the teacher or the school in widely as a textbook form, but it is also available in curriculum framework, also in the form of syllabus. But majority of us consider it is the textbooks that are there, which are the true reflection of the curriculum. But the textbook may not be having all aspects of the curriculum that was being envisaged in the beginning. So therefore, the curriculum has to be referred to quite oftenly by the teacher. Okay, and the student has to refer quite oftenly to the syllabi. And the textbook is a self-learning material for the learners, for the students, and it is not for the teacher. So therefore, teacher has to go beyond the textbook. So he has to refer other resources of knowledge which are concerned in the same area and try to acquire the knowledge in depth and try to transact them in the classroom in a more meaningful manner. So it is in that way, curriculum plays an important role in teaching. So that means it is on this background of curriculum, we try to transact in the classroom. And that transaction, we consider it as knowledge. But that knowledge is provided to the learners in the form of information. Okay, but how is that information is converted into knowledge? Where is that conversion happens?
Changes in the behavior of the students, sir.
It happens in the changes in the behavior of the student. Okay, then how do you know that behavioral change is happened because of the information, the conversion of information in their own process? Okay.
Through assessments.
Through assessment. Okay, fine. So we need to look at the entire process. Okay, so that means here teaching is one aspect. It is followed by learning that we need to look at. And sometimes both teaching and learning goes hands in hand together simultaneously. And finally, both of them should result in a product. And we try to find out that product as learning outcomes or the learning achievements of the learners. So it is in that way. So this curriculum, if you want to say that we have completely attained the curricular goals, which has been enshrined for a particular knowledge kind, then we have to look into it entire processes and try to see what is the outcome of those product that we are able to see in the performance of the learner. Okay. So in the performance of the learner, not only in one form, in multiple form, he has to perform. So it is in that context we are trying to say teaching is not a simple act of only communicating, having interaction, having only some subject knowledge that is there, and we try to transact with that process. So it goes beyond that. So it is in that process. So we require for teaching to happen, we need to have the mastery on the content. We need to know what is the curricular disciplinar goals that one has to master it, or one has to go in depth into that, and how is that is going to be meaningfully transacted in the classroom. So all these aspects are treated as teaching. And this teaching that we are trying to do has a different formats of it. The one we have in educational scenario, we have models followed by its approaches. Then each approaches is followed by its methods. And all the models, approaches, methods involves varieties of strategies inbuilt into them. So therefore, before teaching, we should be apprised of what are these kinds that are available to us as a teacher, and which one I can try to look at it. Now, let me talk about models of teaching. Models of teaching is nothing but a family or a group of teaching methods or approaches that are there with us. So these are broadly 4 families of groups of teaching method models that are available to us. Okay, each model has got its unique objectives to be achieved. And you need to analyze whether your task of teaching falls in this gambit of the objective and whether this model supports you or not. That decision has to be made by the teacher in background of the content and the learners that he or she is going to transact with. The first one is information processing model. As this model is highlighting, it is the focusing on enabling the individual's learner to process the informations that you provide in various forms. Okay, it can be in reading form, it can be in written form, it can be in performing, doing demonstration, doing laboratory activities. Through all those things, they gain experiences. Through that experiences, how do they process that in their brain, in their mind, and make that as their own knowledge? So whatever the knowledge was outside, that needs to be imbibed, it needs to be immersed and made as its own. So it requires the processing in the mind. So that means if your intention is to train the way how one needs to process the given information and try to make it as their own in terms of analysis, in terms of reasoning, in terms of synthesis, in terms of categorization, in terms of grouping, in terms of matching. So in terms of giving varieties of representations, all these things we call it as a process. It is not in only one dimension, it is multiple dimensions. So how one perceives it and how we process that and how we project it is what information processing model talks about. So since it is focusing on the brain, so we say that it focuses on the developing your cognitive abilities, your thinking abilities. The focusing on enhancing the thinking ability of the learner is what more prime importance through your subject knowledge. Then you are opting for information processing model. Then comes the second one is the personal model. As the name says, you are trying to develop the individual in a holistic manner. So that is trying to develop the self, enabling the individual to realize his self-actualizations. If that is the main concern, then you are going to use the personal model. Okay, so that is, it is individualistic in nature. It is not group-oriented activity. Next is social interaction model. So as you know that teaching, learning happens in a social environment. So social learning means there must be more than two persons involved in that. So that means it is a more of a group activity. So when the group activities are there, I am going to interact. So that is, interaction is nothing but asking question, getting answers, posing a question, putting an issue for discussion, debating, then coming to a consensus and trying to make a meaningful conclusion out of that. So if that is the case, then you are going to say, I am going to use social interaction model. And the final one is the behavior modification. As the name itself says, so there is some kind of abnormality in the individual behavior. So what we perceive as a normal behavior in a societal life, if that behavior is not demonstrated and there is some kind of a deviations that you feel in the individual, then you say, I adopt strategies which modify the deviations and bring him to normal practices. So if that is the case, then we are going for behavior modification model. So these are the four important models of teaching that we have in each education, and each of these model comes with its own structure. So that is, each model comes with objectives, its syntax, okay, its support system, its reaction time, and the feedback. So all these processes has to be involved in those kinds of activities. So each model has those structures, and you need to understand how best your kind of knowledge fits into what model and which one is going to be more beneficial to your larger group of learners. So that is what we try to look at. Now there are varieties of approaches that are there for us to teach. So that is, each of these approaches emerges from the models. Okay, they must be derived from any one of those four models that I have highlighted. From those, these approaches are emerging. Okay, so as the highlights, it says that approach is a way of treating or dealing with something. Here something is reference to your kind of knowledge, subject knowledge or content knowledge that you are talking about. It is that the way you want to deal with it, you want to treat with it, you want to make out of it. So anything that you say is what is treating or dealing. So it is anything that you are trying to do with these kinds of knowledge, it is called as an approach. And these approaches emerges from the models. The models are the larger family. From that, approaches emerges. So in this, you have got these kinds of approaches that we have. One is the conceptual approach, where the emphasis is given on developing the concepts. Okay, concepts, we assume that it is the building block of the knowledge. So that is the basic point, foundations of the knowledge, basic ideas. If you think that they needs to be strongly put in, your foundation has to be more strong, the concept needs to be understood very clearly, very thoroughly, then you are going to use this conceptual approach. Second is the process approach. So here you are going ahead with the concept and then try to say there are chains of reaction that happens, consequence of each of these steps that we follow. So you need to understand how those processes completes and what is the final product of that. So that is the process approach. Then we have the authoritarian or teacher-centered approach. So that means here teachers in the classroom is considered as authority of the knowledge. Okay, it is based on his educational qualification, his experience in the classroom. The parent consider that and the student treat it as, and society also treats as an authority. So if it is there as an authority means here it becomes the authoritarian centered approach. So that whatever the teacher directs, the same thing happens in the classroom, the same activity happens in that, and teacher occupies the prime focal point in the classroom. No other person gets more attention and involvement in those activities. So this is what we call it as authoritarian or teacher-centered approach. The opposite of that is what we call as child-centered or learner-centered approach. So where students get the more time for interaction, for posing their questions, clearing their doubts, trying to get the clarity on the ideas that we are trying to project. So if those things are done, dominated by the student majorly in the classroom, then we say it is a child-centered or student-centered approach. Then we also have discovery approach, where we say both no teacher, learner are not dominating the class. It is the subject knowledge that is dominating. In the process of doing activities, exploring it, they come out with their own new ideas. So that is what we call it as discovery approach. So that means your knowledge need not be always directed. It can be explored and found by the individual on their own. So that is what we try to say as discovery approach. So it doesn't mean that they are going to come out with the new knowledge. No, the knowledge which was unknown to them is made known to them. So if that is known to them on their own, we call that as discovery or heuristic approach. Okay, so don't relate it with the science, scientists, innovatives, and other things. Okay, so anything which was unknown to them earlier and made known to them on their own ways, even approaches, it is called discovery. Then we know that a project-based approach. Now at the higher level, we try to give that, so it becomes motivating the learners to do the independent work, trying to know the work in multiple dimensions, trying to organize it, trying to get the support of the different agencies, different people, and trying to accomplish it in a given time. So that is what a project-based approach is talking about. Similarly, we have activity-based approach. So where we say that our classroom, though I am trying to provide interactions, through interactions also, it is supported by making them to perform some activity in the classroom. It can be anything, any activity that can be mattered as per your subject knowledge. You can try to say what is that activity, and if my entire classroom is dominated through activities only, then I say it is a activity-based approach. Then comes the problem-solving approach. So where you try to give a problematic situation to the learner, and with the already acquired knowledge and the encountered problem, the learner has to solve it on their own, trying to connect already having the experiences of solving similar kind or of a different kind of problems, try to put it into action and try to explore the possibility of obtaining a solution. If we are trying to do that, then we say it is a problem solving approach. Then finally, we have inductive approach as well as deductive approach. So where induction is building up the knowledge and the deduction gives much emphasis on application of the knowledge. So if you are trying to encourage the learner to how to create knowledge and use knowledge, then we are going to use inductive followed by deductive to make the learning in a holistic manner. So these are the varieties of approaches we have, and based on these approaches, we have similar methods according to that. Okay, so each approach comes with its own methods of teaching. Okay, so there are major methods of teaching available for teachers. These are some of them that I have focused on. One is teacher-centered methods. Okay, where you are going to say that I am going to use this. So I want to transact large quantity of knowledge in a given small time. If that is the case, then I say I am going to use lecture method. Okay, it is a teacher-centered method because teacher is going to give a lot of information and less active participation of the learner. So therefore, it is a teacher-centered method. Then learner-centered methods. If the reverse is happening, the teacher is only in the beginning, gives a prompt the students, highlights what they are supposed to do in the classroom, and the rest of the time, the students are engaged actively in the classroom by doing varieties of activities. Then then at the end, you monitor them, you assess them, and try to ensure that learning has happened. If that is the case is happening, then you say it is a learner-centered methods that you are trying to look at. Okay, then in both of these teacher and learner-centered method, you can also try to include content-focused methods. So you say that no, I am much worried about developing the discipline knowledge in depth and trying to give their essence of the knowledge. If that is a more focus, then you are going to use the content-focused methods like your laboratory methods. Okay, critical inquiry methods. Okay, then your exploratory methods. So when you say that, through that you are trying to make the learner to understand the subject knowledge rather than who is dominating or not. That is not the issues. So like this, you can try to do that. Then finally, we have interactive or participative method. So that means here, in all those things, if you give create opportunity for learners to interact in a more constructive, productive manner, then we say this interactive and participative methods are also there. Okay, then the strategies are there in any kind of method you choose, any kind of approach you choose, any kind of model you choose for teaching. In all those things, strategies are the core elements. They are the central element which percolates across every approaches and every models that are there. The first one is differentiated instruction. So as the name says that it is differentiated. So I am trying to differentiate each learner from other. And I need to recognize that each learner is unique. They are not common, though there are many common factors among all the kinds of learners, but still there is a differences among them. So here the differentiated instruction try to focus on one-to-one teaching, one-to-one direct instructions are given and trying to enable the learner to develop his potential and perform in a normal way. So that is, we are trying to see according to their learning styles. So that is here, there are varieties of learners that are there. So that is agile learner, visual learner, kinesthetic learner, reading, writing learners. All these kinds of learners are there. According to their needs, their style, I am going to give the particular kind of instructions to them, which facilitates their learning. So that is what this differentiated instruction is talking about. Then I can also try to look at the cooperative learning strategies. So that is where if I consider my classroom as a group learning as one single group, within the group I can form varieties of subgroups and encourage the discussions, meaningful discussion in the subgroups, and then come to the whole group and share their ideas, have the discussion, and finally draw the conclusion. So these are the things that we can do. For group forming, there are various methods. So one of the method is jigsaw method. Okay, so there are other methods also you can explore and try to see how you can try to make use of cooperative learning as an essential strategy in your classroom transaction. Next is you can utilize varieties of technology in the classroom. That is your ICT dominated classrooms. Now we talk about the artificial intelligence, we talk about machine learning, we talk about Internet of Things, IoT. So how do we bring that? All those factors which are happening in computer science or in science and technology revolution into my classroom processes. How do I use my multimedia? How do I use my smart classroom boards? Okay, how do I encourage students to develop that computational computer skills? Okay, all those things will come into your consideration, and you have to master them. If you are not knowing them, you need to know them, you need to learn them, you have to master them and try to put it into your classroom practices. So that is also one of the things. That means here when you bring technology into classroom, so it is not going to be the same kind of your formal classroom. It has to change over to different modes and patterns. And in that, you are going to see how best you are going to manage your classroom. And next is inquiry-based instructions. So it is only asking questions, stimulate questions as a stimulating factors, motivating factors, and trying to get the answers from the students itself. And based on the answer obtained, pose a question, ask them to think, explore deeper into those aspects, and then trying to come to the exact solutions. If you try to do that, then it becomes inquiry-based instructions can be there, and then your graphical organizers. So where you can try to put them in varieties of graphical forms, in charts, infographics, okay, in charts, in tables, in any other form, you can use them, put them, those information in a meaningful manner, and try to use them as your partners. Okay, there are research studies have done which shows that if you use these strategies effectively, then they give you the good result. So there are 10 evidence-based strategies of teaching that have been done through research evidences, and they have been quoted here. The first is you need to find that you need to make your students understand what is the lessons goal, why you are there in the classroom, what this particular lesson or chapter is about and what you are going to learn from this. These aspirations, aspects has to be made clear to them. That is, you need to tell what the goal is. Then show and tell. So that means whenever you are using any of the resources, learning resources,
म्हणूनच आपण आता जी निर्णय घेतला की
Okay.
कोणतीच प्रश्न काढायची नाही.
whenever you are trying to show that, okay, use the learning resources, including your charts, including your model, doing your any demonstration, anything, first show them, then you tell about it, explain about that, okay, without any confusions in between. So that is what we mean by show and tell. Then third is questioning to check for understanding. Okay, don't think that assessment I am going to do at the end of my class. No, you want to ensure that whether they are listening to you, whether they are in the class, they are paying attention to the concerned knowledge transaction or not. So for that in between, you need to check them by asking questions. Okay, so that is what we call it as assessment question in between, to understand whether they are in the class or they are not. We can check that by asking questions. Then summarize new learning in a graphical way. So after the end of the each chapter, if you want to develop a summarization of that chapter, you draw a flow chart, or you draw a model, or you draw a concept map, or any relational map which has an interconnection, and that will help the students to visualize and assimilate the information in a more concrete manner. So that is what they say. Then give provision for plenty of practice. If something exercises are there, you want the learner to do that activity again and again, only then to master that, then you say, if this practices must be given. So that means we try to give them in terms of giving assignments, or in terms of project work, or some, or as your apprenticeship activities, you can give plenty of practices for them to ensure that how theoretical knowledge is put into practice and how that practical utility is seen can be looked at. Then provide your students with feedback. So whenever you give any task to them, any project work to them, whenever they submit it, whenever the test is given, whenever you value that, if you don't give that value test paper back to the learners, then they will not try to know where they have committed mistakes or where they have mastered it and where they require to improve upon. All those things has to happen in terms of your feedback. So that means feedbacks is an important aspect of your assessment. If you are not doing that activity, it will not serve the purpose of your assessment also. So it is feedback is to enshrine that students' strengths are highlighted and their weaknesses are shown to them, and given opportunity for them to, and shown the way to improve their weaknesses, convert the weaknesses into their strengths. So that is what it talks about. So be flexible about how long it takes to learn. So that means here all learners are not in the same kind of learners. Some are slow learners, some are average learners, some are fast learners. So each learner requires his own time for learning. So you have to give adequate time for their knowing the kind of learner that you have with him. So you have to provide that sufficient time. Okay, that is what we mean by that. So if some student asks, sir, give me 1 day extra, I will complete it. You must be flexible, accept it. So like this, so in your flexibility can be shown for students to accomplish the given task. No student should be denied the opportunity of completing it. Now get students working together. So if you are trying to project individual work and you can avoid that, you can give the group work. So the group learning has many more other value addition to that. Okay, how do they cooperate? How do they understand each other? How do they know their role? How do they discharge their responsibilities? How do they come together to make their own presentations? All this activity happens here. So try to do that. Working in group must be encouraged. Then teach strategies, not just content. So that means here, don't teach only the content is the base for everything. For doing that also, you have to give the strategies. Strategies are nothing but the techniques that you are going to say that how the same thing can be looked in a different way, and it enables you to arrive at the solution in a more faster way. That is what your strategies must help the learners to do that. So don't be emphasizing only on the content, but also try to teach them how that can be learned. Okay, nurture metacognition. So metacognition is nothing but make the child to use their thinking abilities and to reflect on their thinking abilities. So metacognition is nothing but thinking on thinking, okay, reading on reading, okay, reflection on reflection. So it is a revision. It is a revising activity that you do before taking a final decision. Okay, before taking a final decision, one has to look at how we has arrived at that decision. Is it the right decision or can it be modified? That momentary reflecting back on the entire process and reaffirming his decision and finally taking a final call on that is what we mean by metacognition. Okay, so it is this activities, these are the 10 evidences that we have. Strategies, if teachers evolve, then it gives you a good result in all your teaching process activities. Then these are the skills that we try to involve in any kind of teaching that we have. One is principles and methods teachers that we use should enable students learning. So whatever you are going to do, it must ultimately focus the learner to learn. And teachers should believe that teaching skills and the learning skills are continuous process. It is not one-time affair. It is not only one semester or one academic year. So it is a continuous process. So, and we need to be continuously learning that. And I believe that teachers become true learner when you go for teaching process. Okay, because you will be anticipating what kind of questions a student may ask in any direction. So you all be for answering those kinds of questions, we go in search of more knowledge, more resources, and therefore we become more rich in content knowledge. So it is in that process we need to be more continuously learning. And now, if you want to adopt research-based strategies into your in your classroom, then you have to refer to research articles. And even you can also publish based on your experiences, articles in any educational journals and try to disseminate the information. So it is in that way we need to keep ourselves updated continuously for changing scenario. Next is some qualities of good teacher includes skills in communication, listening, collaboration, adaptability, empathy, and patience. So these are the essential qualities. They consider it that must be there in any good teacher that you come across. Okay, that means you must have good communication skills. So to have the communication skills, you have the good language abilities. You should have good vocabulary. Okay, you have fluency. Okay, so these are the things that encompasses in communication skills. And then you must be a good listener. That means you must listen to your learner, their problems, their issues, their needs, that you need to listen. Then try to address them if it is possible in your own ways. Or try to get the help of others, other teachers, parents, administrator through collaborations. That is what collaboration is talking about. Then which are the qualities, techniques that you observe somewhere in some form? Can that be put into practice in your classroom? In the background of your learners' abilities. Try to put that, adopt that, make changes and modifications. And then always try to have the empathy. So now we don't call sympathy. So it is empathy. That means putting yourselves in the learner's position and trying to understand them. So that is what empathy is. Then you must always extreme levels, you have to show your patience. So that means you should not show your anger emotions in the classroom. So you must be always calm. Okay, calm, quiet. Listen to them, react to them in a more meaningful manner so that it encourages them. So you become more approachable to your learners. Then other characteristics engaging is classroom presence, your energetic classroom presence. So that means whatever the student question asks, you must be able to give them the reply in a suitable manner, appropriate manner, which is relevant to the conditions that you have to look at. Then value in real world learning. So that is whatever I am going to teach in the classroom, how it is going to be visualized or seen in the day-to-day real life context. So you have to highlight which are those contexts this idea is made use of and how this is being treated by different kinds of disciplined people. So that you have to talk about it. then exchange of ideas and practices, and lifelong love for learning. Okay, so these are the things that they say these are essential that must be there in the teaching activity. So only when we adopt those kinds of practices, and it also says that teacher has his or her own philosophy. Philosophy is way of life, the way you want to deal with, the way you want to practice, the way you want to demonstrate. So even that also has influence in your classroom teaching process. So therefore, you need to look at how, as a role model, you are trying to project yourself in the classroom, and what qualities you are imbibing, you are projecting it. The same thing is adopted by your learners, and same kind of people we can expect in this society also. So it is in that way we consider teachers are the nation builders. So therefore, we need to be acting, we need to be projecting, having all the characteristics that are most essential for a very quality performances. So it is in that way, teacher teaching is a important professional job that we are embraced, and we need to discharge that with that responsibility. So that is the one part of the teacher. We talk about only the teacher perspective, from the knowledge perspective, how teacher is trying to transact the content knowledge that he has mastered it. Now he has to transact that knowledge to the learners of different age levels in a more meaningful manner. So that is what we try to understand in terms of what is learning process. Okay, so even all of us have undergone this learning process at different ages, starting from 0 years till the death. The learning is happening. Okay, so we have learned in different ways, different approaches, and the psychology talks about varieties of approaches and theories of learning. Okay, so therefore, even if you have become a teacher, then they say you must know some amount of philosophy, some amount of sociological knowledge, some amount of psychological knowledge, which is more convenient for you to understand and to deal with it effectively for the target group. So it is in that context. So understanding the basics of psychology, educational psychology of the age appropriate classical stages is essential. So it is in that level, these approaches are there. So you can refer to any educational psychology books. They give you number of theories, read them, understand them, how varieties of psychologists from different countries, different backgrounds have contributed for trying to understand the learning which is happening in human being and how this transformation is happening. So these are some of the approaches that we have. I have classified them into 4 major approaches, and each of them approaches comes with a different theories associated with them. First one is the behaviorist approach. So psychology started with trying to understand the behavior. So behavior, they presume that it is the manifestation of individual's thought process and which he expresses overtly. Okay, what we see outside in terms of his facial expressions. Okay, his behavior, his actions is what we call it as behavior. Okay, so therefore in the beginning psychology thought that it is only the modification of behavior is what learning is. What teaching should enable to do that. But behavior is not only that. So behavior, they later on, as the research goes on into that, they say that whatever behavior we see outside is the resultant of inert behavior individual has. So inner behaviors is transformed, it is analyzed by the individual in his own ways, and it is expressed. And the way in which he expresses and does actions is what we see it as outer behavior. So it is in that way they try to look at this behavior, and in that we have Thorndike theory of learning. Okay, where it talks about trial and error learning. So we don't learn everything in one go. So we don't master it. So while learning, we make errors and we have the urge to make trials to learn. Okay, as the number of trials increases, the number of errors that we commit keeps on decreasing. Okay, if I keep on doing that trials, then I master that and that becomes my habit. It is a natural habit. So it becomes my natural behavior. So it is in that way. So in the beginning, when we try to learn, we do try them, and then we try to make the errors. So errors are the ways to understand how individual is trying to learn and how things can be addressed and modified. So it is in that way, trial and error learning is there. And even we have classical conditioning theories are there, apparent conditioning theories are there. So in which they try to mold that and train that. Like for example, if you go to the circus, how animals are trained to behave in a particular manner. That is what we call it as apparent conditioning theory. So that means if you only perform that action, only then the reward is given. So the basically learning theories, they say that if there is a stimulus that is very strong in itself, then that stimulus generates an appropriate response from the opponent. If the stimulus and response are bonded together, then only the learning happens. So that is the basic idea. Then who is the stimulant in the classroom? It is the teacher. Which is the response that we get? It is the learner. Whatever the teacher poses, does in the classroom, acts as a stimulus. For each of those stimulus, the student is giving his own reactions to that. If a teacher is providing some actions, student is giving a reaction. If actions and reactions are, if they are in a desired manner, and that needs to be strengthened. There must be a bond between S and R. So we say SR bonds. So in chemistry, you talk about your ionic bond, covalent bond, other bonds, whichever is strong in that. If you try to build those kinds of bond with your SR, then only the chain of this SR becomes your learning. Okay, so that is what the learning theories, basic ideas, they talk about that. Okay, but the cognitive approach, they deviate from this SR theories and they say that no, it is not only the bonding, it is a complete understanding of the whole situation. The cognitive approach gives much importance to the thinking process, thought process that happens in your brain, in your mind, and they consider mind as an entire field. Okay, within that field itself, there is a stimulus, there is a problem that is posed by the external item, and the individual perceives it and tries to explore in his own mind using his memory and try to, from the memory, explore his ideas, bring that ideas and try to find solution to that. So it is what they call it as cognitive approach. So that means here the learning not only on establishing S and R bonds, it also goes beyond that. It is only individual's interest, individual inquisitiveness, individual urge that makes them to go for learning in their own fashions and other things. So that is what the cognitive approach talks about. And it says that these cognitive approaches are stage specific, age specific, and everything has to go in that particular operations only. And they believe that this learning has to happen only through 5 sense organs. Okay, how do you bring that 5 sense organs into activity in your classroom? To that extent, your learning becomes permanent. Okay, so it is in that way they try to see how do you bring those sense organs into action is what they talk about. In the cognitive approach, though much of sense organs are not there, it is only the thinking that you stimulate. That thinking you may stimulate through word problem, through visual problems, or some problematic situation, you can make them to do those activities. That the constructivist approach is the offshoot of the cognitive approach, where they are trying to say that though the individual is able to visualize the problem and solution, but there is a process. When the thought process happens there, that thought process has to be analyzed, assimilated, and a meaning of that process has to be created by the learner themselves. The creation of meaning happens in their own mind. So therefore, they say that constructivist approach believes that learners can and they are empowered to create their own knowledge. Okay, they can create their own knowledge and use that knowledge for various purposes. So if that is the philosophy, then you may ask, what is the role of the teacher there? Yes, the teacher role is not to teach, but to become a facilitator. Okay, you need to become a facilitator of creation of that knowledge. If any individual has any doubts in that process, if he has any questions, if he has any difficulty, the teacher has to identify that and he has to support them by giving adequate clues, adequate responses, and asking them to explore in different ways. So it is in that way we are trying to do the role of facilitation in that particular way. So it is in that way the constructivist approach says that the teacher need not dominate. He can only create the learning environment and provide all kinds of learning resources to the learners in the classroom, and they themselves will learn on their own. And teacher has to monitor and finally assess them. That is what the constructivist approach is talking about. Now, finally, other one is the connectionist approach, where we are trying to see that I need to connect various ideas. As a learner, I am not learning only one subject knowledge in a course. I am learning multiple core disciplines. Okay, I need to blend them. I need to use them whenever the occasion comes. So I cannot treat them as individual disciplines. I need to blend them. I need to interconnect them. I need to see how, if I holistically look at all kinds of knowledge, how I can put them into actions for my benefits. So that is what the connectionist approach is talking about. So this is what the booming area in psychology, which is called as neuropsychology, okay, which talks about central nervous systems. So the body is connected with the nerves, and the nerves carry the neurons. The neurons carry the information to the brain. It is a central nervous system which processes it and gives the corresponding responses to the bodies. So how is that is happening in the central nervous system? How is that neurons carry that? Neuron carries the information in a coded way, and how it is decoded. And again, how is that is again sent back as a coded and how it is decoded. So these are the technologies that we talk, the modern technology as artificial intelligence, coding, decoding, other things. How is that are connected? How do I interconnect them? My only one kind of knowledge will not help them. Sometime I may require biology, sometime I may require physics, sometime I may require chemistry, sometime I may require mathematics, sometime I may require language. Okay, I may require geography, I may require any other disciplines to support, to overcome my problematic situation. So it is in that way, when I try to make connectionist through my central nervous system also, I need to connect my knowledge with different kinds of knowledge which are around it. So therefore, I may use technology as a supporting tool to enhance those kinds of activities. So these are the things that are there for us. Okay, so when I try to do that, when I want to teach that, then we need to deal it in a very systematic way. Pedagogy is nothing but it is the way of teaching that we try to do it up to the age of 18 years. We consider up to adolescent age, pedagogy is considered. If you are teaching in the college level, after the 18 years, you are going to use the andragogy. Okay, so pedagogy is child-centered, child-dominated, where child depends on the teacher, depends on the one source of learning, and it doesn't explore the multiple sources. But when it comes to adults, they have the opportunity of looking at the informations in multiple ways and multiple forms, and therefore a teacher is only one of the source of information. So they will collect information in many sources. So in that context, we are going to use andragogy there, and here in that process, we are going to give more of self-learning activity than depending on the teacher. So when I'm trying to understand this pedagogy, I need to understand what I am going to teach. So what kind of subject discipline I have and what kind of knowledge it has. So I need to analyze what is this content is about. So when we read any content in any subject, so we can classify that content knowledge into 4 categories. Okay, one is the factual knowledge, where it talks about only the facts. Facts are the universal truth statements that you can verify at any time, anywhere. Okay, then conceptual knowledge, where each of those concepts has their unique characteristics, unique ideas, different from others. Based on these unique characteristics, I can differentiate them, I can categorize them, I can group them, I can give a name to them, and I can deal them uniquely. That is what the concept of the conceptual knowledge is. Okay. For example, if I show this is a pen, okay, every one of us use this. Okay, then what is the uniqueness of this pen? Okay, a brand is there, but you may say, what is that? How it is different from other pen? Okay, how is this pen is different from your generally used pens? Okay, all of them are ballpoint pen. So what is the difference between a ballpoint pen and a ink pen? Okay, how it is your Parker pen is different from other pens. So you are able to categorize that. In what basis you classify that? You can try to do that. So that is what we talk in terms of conceptual. Then, so it is the knowledge is not only based on the facts and concepts. There are series of facts and concepts are interlinked. There is a chain of informations having facts as well as concepts. So that we call it as procedures. Okay, the stepwise approaches of looking at things. That is what we call it as procedural knowledge. Then metacognitive knowledge. So where it makes you to think beyond your subject disciplines and try to pose a question to yourself. What if something is not there? Okay, what if India has not got independence in 1947? Okay, what if India has dropped the nuclear bomb? Okay, if this is the questions are there, then it gives scope for wider thinking, multiple dimensions. There is no unique answers to that. Okay, you'll have multiple answers from each individual perspectives, from each individual way of looking at things. You have your own answers to that. So it is in that way you are going to develop the thinking abilities in a higher order ways. Then apart from this categorization of knowledge in any discipline, we can also categorize them into content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, technological pedagogical content knowledge. So these are the other kinds where content knowledge only talks about the discipline subject oriented knowledge. Then how do I teach this subject to a relevant group of learners based on the stage and their age? Then I am going to look into pedagogical content knowledge. So in that, if I'm using any technology to that, then it becomes technological pedagogical content knowledge. So if you look at this circle here, so these are the three areas of knowledge that classification one can do in a broader way. The one is the content knowledge, another is the pedagogical knowledge, and technological knowledge. So these are the three rings, Venn diagrams, overlapping, intersecting with each other. So at the point of intersection, it gives scope for me to develop other kind of knowledge. Okay, the technological pedagogical content knowledge is the combination of these two regions. Okay, so like this, I can combine, I will get different kinds of combination of knowledge. So three sectors are there. If I see the intersections of that, where it is and how is that is trying to give me the promotions, then you can try to look at it. Okay, if you are looking at only one perspective, it gives only one kind of knowledge that we talk about. So now we are trying to look at how these knowledge are integrated. Okay, and where is that interactive factors are there, and how do I look at it, and how do I separate from other factors? So as a teacher, you must be able to understand all this perspective and try to do this. Next, why you want to do this? Because we want the learner to learn it. Okay, what is the learning? How learning happens and how does learner learn? If that question is asked, then the answer is the learning happens in the individual's mind and it happens in three domains. Okay, three major domains. The first domain is cognitive domain, next is affective, third is psychomotor domain. Okay, each of these are overlapping. They are not independent. They are not isolated. Cognitive means knowing aspect. How do I know it? How do I perceive it? Next, affective means how do I feel it? Is that knowledge worthwhile? Is good for me or not? Is trying to make a decision with the emotions. Is trying to do that. Then finally, after interacting with cognitive and affective, it finally should convert into psychomotor. So that is the skill aspects, it doing aspects. Unless and until all these three happens, if my knowing is not resulting in a skill, then learning is not completely happening. Okay, so knowing is not just acquiring knowledge. I need to apply that knowledge into my given context. So this is what the domains of learnings are there, and each of these domains have the classifications are there. So we call that the taxonomy of our learning. So each cognitive levels, there are 6 classification. It starts with knowledge, then comprehension, application, analysis, then synthesis and creative. This is the old cognitive approach here. Then again, affective domain, there are again 5 sub classifications. The highest one is the topmost one. Then similarly, psychomotor domain starts with your reflex movements and then finally comes to communications and other activities. So these are the ways we try to see how domains are there. So this is the new revised Bloom taxonomy. So where we consider more emphasis on cognitive activities. So in turn, it enables us to go to the psychomotor domain through affective domains. So the revised taxonomy talks about the learner learns by remembering it, then comprehending it, then apply that knowledge. Then when he goes for applying it, he is going to analyze whether it is correct or not. Then he is going to evaluate it. Then based on that evaluation, he is trying to create his own knowledge. So this is what the revised Bloom cognitive process domains are. So then what are the considerations that we need to take care of when we go into classroom for teaching purposes? So you need to consider what are the learning theories that are there for you and which learning theory you are embracing for this particular class and why and what aspects of that you must have clarity in your own thought process. Then learning space or environment where you want to teach this. Okay, learning your own subject environment has to be created. Then creation of learning activities. So do you want to make them to become active participant in the learning process? Then you have to give learning activities. And you need to explore what are the various learning resources that are there and how I can use that. So by giving all these things, you are able to provide learning experiences. So that means experiential learning is important. Only through experiences, meanings are created. Through that meaning, knowledge is constructed. So therefore, you need to provide experiences. So here, direct experience and indirect experiences, 2 categories are there. Direct experiences is making the learner, making his sense organs, more than 1 or 2 sense organs to be involved in the activity. If it is there, only then we say it is a direct learning experience. If it is not there, then we say it is a virtual learning experience. So you are sitting in your own place, you are listening to me by watching this link. Okay, so it is a virtual learning, it is not a direct experience. Okay, it is a virtual experience. Then adopting student-centered learning approaches and the assessment processes. These are the important considerations we need to have before going into the classroom processes. Okay, why do we go into classroom? So when we go to the classroom is then we have to have these learning objectives, which acts as a guiding force for our teaching learning process. They ensure attainment of them through predetermined activities of learning. So that means you are there in the classroom for a productive, constructive activity, and you should ensure that that has happened after 40 minutes or 60 minutes. We should ensure that. And it also indicates the adoption of assessment process. So that means here we need to write our class objectives. What is that I am going to do in my class, and what is that I am going to accomplish this after 40 minutes or 60 minutes of my class transaction. If you are able to write that, and that statement will enable you to reflect on all these 3 aspects and enable you to say that yes, you are in the right track and you are going to accomplish that. Okay, so all this you are going to form based on the functions of the domains of the 3 domains, cognitive, affective, psychomotor domain. So therefore, I insist that teacher always wears a cap. Okay, not a physical cap. So that means your cognitive, affective, psychomotor domain, these factors are already kept in your mind and you wear that as a cap on your head and you will go to the classroom. So that your teaching should enable each learner to do some activity in all these 3 areas. And your cognitive activity must transform into a psychomotor skill developmental activity. So this is what is the purpose of our entering into the classroom as a teaching purposes and the way we want the learner to do this. Okay. With that, now I end my first session.